The first thing I want to talk about in the groove section is something I created called the Easy Beat System. Now this is a simple system that you can use to write your own beats. And once you go through the Easy Beat System and you kind of do all the exercises and you do all the homework, if you want to call it that, you're going to find that it's way easier for you to just come up with your own beats on the spot naturally without even using the system anymore. Because this is something that I hope is going to teach you creativity and help you get a better sense of how grooves are built on the drum set. So take a look at the sheet music that I provided. You'll notice that this is a three-step system. Step one is when we add the hi-hat in, or whatever your lead voice is. So it's the hi-hat or the ride. Sometimes you'll crash on the crash cymbal. But whatever your lead voice is, you know, you're playing eighth notes on the hi-hat or 16th notes or whatever, that's what step one is. So first, we write the hi-hat part. So take a look at exercise 1. I've written in just a basic eighth note hi-hat part on the top line. In step 2, we're just going to add the snare drum. Now you can add the snare drum wherever you want. This is the beauty of this, and we'll talk more about that later as we continue to develop more complex beats using this method. For the first example, I wanted to give you a very simple groove just to show you how easy it is for you to come up with your own grooves later on. Okay, so the next step is adding the snare drum. Snare drum is on counts 2 and 4 with our left hand. And then the final step is adding in the bass drum on counts 1 and 3. And again, this is just how I made this beat. And this is a very common beat, so I didn't write this as a brand new beat. But you'll find as you do this later, you can put the bass drum on weird 16th note placements or 16th note triplet placements, or just have no bass drum or have very, very few bass drum notes within each bar. What I've done is I've just put the bass drum on counts 1 and counts 3, which would sound like this. So it's very simple. Hi-hat, snare, and then bass drum. Those are the 3 steps. And it's very similar to how a piano player would build a chord triad. And I don't want to get into any piano theory. I play a very little bit. But they will start with the 1, or the root, and then they'll have a 3, and then the 5. And that will build their chord triad. And the same way applies to the drum set. We have our hi-hat, which is our root. We have our snare drum, which could be considered the 3, and then we have the bass drum, which could be considered the 5. Now, we're not getting into any of piano theory or anything like that here. I just want to try and transfer that thought process over to the drum set to show you that it's really quite simple to develop your own beats. And so for you guys, you're out there looking for more beats, and you're like, I want more beats, or I can't come up with my own beats. All I can do is, get sheet music from someone else and learn their beats, but then you're getting better at playing their style, which isn't always the best way to learn the drums. You want to get better at playing your style, and you want to come up with your own beats in something that you wrote yourself. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play exercise 1 for you. I'm going to play 4 bars of the first bar, which is just the hi-hat. Then I'm going to play 4 bars of the second bar, which is the hi-hat adding the snare. And then I'm going to play 4 bars of the third bar, which is the hi-hat, snare, and bass drum. We're going to do this at 60 beats per minute, and you can really see how this whole beat is built from ground up. So there we have it. We have our completed beat, and we built this using the Easy Beat system. Now I'll play it at 120 beats per minute for you and just show you how the completed beat sounds played up to speed. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Jared, that's a simple beat. Anybody knows that beat already. Why do you have to write that? Why do you have to create it? And I just use that to give you guys an example of the Easy Beat system. So what I've done here is I've written out 9 more examples that we're going to go through one by one, and a lot of these are a lot more complex, okay? So bear with me and just continue to kind of follow along and see how these beats are built from the ground up. So take a look at exercise 2. Now we have our hi-hat stroke on all the upbeats, or the and stroke. And the snare drum is being added in on the of 1 and count 4. Okay, so let's hear how that sounds. And the final thing is the bass drum. We're putting the bass drum on counts 1 and counts 3. So it's very simple. It doesn't have to be complex, but you'll see how this beat actually comes together and sounds pretty cool. Now, if you wanted to do something different, you could put the bass drum on count 1 and the E of 4. You could put the bass drum on count 1 and the of 3. You could do whatever you want to make it more complex or to simplify it. The beauty of this is you can just do whatever you want, and you can literally just create easily and on the spot. So I'll show you how it sounds played all together. Now we're going to put a metronome at 60 beats per minute, and I'm going to build the beat for you ground up, and you can hear it with the metronome going to kind of put it all in context. Here we go. And now let's play it at 120 so I can show you how this thing sounds when played up to speed. So now let's move on to the next example. Here I've got just straight 16th notes. So on the hi-hat, we're going to be playing right, left, and it's going to be going for the full bar of 16th notes with no rest. That would sound like this. Now let's add the snare drum in there. Now, because we're adding the snare drum in when we're going constant 16th notes, that's going to naturally remove some of those hi-hat strokes and just move them to the snare drum. So you see what I've done is I've added the snare drum on counts 2, the of 2, and then counts 4. And now let's add the bass drum. This is fun because you can literally just put the bass drum wherever you want. I put it in on counts 1, and then the E of 3, and the and of 3, which sounds like this. Now let's build this beat with the metronome so you can hear how it sounds in context. And now let's play this exercise up to speed at 120 beats per minute. So I just love this system, and I love how simple it is. I think any drummer can grasp this, especially a drummer like you, who I know has an understanding of all the note values and all the rest, because you've already gone through all that stuff, which is great. You have an awesome foundation, and now you're ready to take your drumming wherever you want to go. Let's look at the next exercise. The next exercise, I have a very simple hi-hat pattern. The hi-hat pattern is just quarter notes on the hi-hat. So the hi-hat part is dead simple. Now it gets challenging when we add the snare in. Because we just got this really basic subdivision on the hi-hat, especially when played slowly, there's a lot of space in between each hi-hat stroke. So what I've done to kind of make it challenging and also make it a little bit more interesting is I've put some 16th note ghost notes on the snare drum. So there's a ghost note on the E of 1, so right after the hi-hat stroke. Then we hit an accented stroke on count 2, which is our backbeat. Then we hit another ghost note on the E of 3, an accented stroke on count 4, which is also a dotted 8th note, okay, which means the next 16th note is going to come on the ah of 4, and that is also a ghost note on the snare drum. That would sound like this. Now we're going to add in the bass drum, and I've done something weird and funky with the bass drum just because I love building beats this way. I put a bass drum stroke on the 1, the ah of 1, the and of 2, then the 3, the ah of 3, and then that's it. Okay, so the whole groove comes together and it sounds awesome. I'll play it for you at 60 beats per minute, and we're going to build it nice and slow. It's a little bit challenging because of the subdivisions on the hi-hat. This is just kind of chugging along, and it seems very slowly, and there's so much space in between each of these notes. Here it goes. Okay, so now it's going to get more and more interesting as we continue to progress. So I'm going to build this one at 60 beats per minute, which is very slow, especially with the quarter note pulse here on the hi-hat, but you're really going to see how this beat comes together. Now let's play this one at 120, and I'll show you guys how it sounds up to speed. Exercise 5, the hi-hat part gets even trickier. Okay, what I've done here is I've put hi-hat strokes on the 1 E and, 2 E and, 3 E and, 4 E and. So we're basically playing all the 16th notes except one count at the end of each beat. We're leaving out the ah of each beat. And that looks like this. And next we're going to add the snare drum in. And I'm challenging you guys by adding some ghost notes and accented notes underneath this awesome hi-hat pattern. And it sounds like this. Finally, we're going to add the bass drum in, and the bass drum is on the 1, the ah of 1, and the and of 2. and that repeats for the last two counts as well. So it goes in the 3, the of 3, and the and of 4. And this is actually turning out to be kind of a Latin groove called a bio, which is one of my all-time favorite grooves to play. Normally in that, you play a cross stick and you'll do some open hi-hat stuff, but we're not going to worry about that. We're just going to build the groove this way. Here we go. Now let's build this groove at 60 beats per minute so you can see how it all comes together. Now let's play this one up to speed at 120 beats per minute. Now we're going to move on to another complex hi-hat pattern. This one starts with just an eighth note, and then we play another hi-hat on the and the ah. And this just repeats itself for the whole bar. So this sounds like this. Now the snare drum is going to come in on the E of 1 and the E of 3 as ghost notes, and then on counts 2 and counts 4 as our backbeat, which sounds like this. The bass drum is on count 1, the E of 2, count 3, and then the E of 4. Now let's put it all together at 60 beats per minute. Now let's play exercise 6 up to speed at 120 beats per minute. Now this next groove is a personal favorite of mine, or I guess the concept is a personal favorite of mine, so I wanted to kind of build new grooves off of this concept. And it was basically based on the idea of shifting the 8th note on the hi-hat over 1/16th note. So just displacing it, and now this hi-hat, this 8th note hi-hat pattern, we're normally playing on counts 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and we're playing on the E's and the Ah's of each count. So to time, it would sound like this. So it doesn't sound like much. You're like, oh, that sounds just like normal. But when you put that to a metronome, you're going to hear how it all comes together. And you'll also hear how it comes together when I add the snare drum in. So here we go. Now let's add the bass drum on counts 1 and the end of 1, and then the 3 and the end of 3. You'll probably notice what I'm doing with my hi-hat there, and that's just because I don't want this constant stroke. I want to give the groove a little bit of texture, a little bit of feel, a little bit more soul, and that's something that'll come through for you as you continue to develop your own style. And use like the shoulder tip method, as we were talking about in past lessons. But it's just really important to have this feel and not just play the groove mechanically, or think of it as a computer-generated groove or a drum machine or anything like that. This has to be you playing it. There has to be push and pull. There has to be that texture within the groove and that feel. So when someone else is listening to you, they're naturally going to start bobbing their head. That's what you want. And if you get that, you've had success. So here's what I'll do. I'll play this one at 60 beats per minute for you and show you how it's all built. Now I'll play this one up to speed for you at 120 beats per minute, which is a little bit more challenging, getting all of those 16th notes on the hi-hat sounding perfectly in time. Here we go. In the next one, we're going to change up the note value, and we're also going to change the voice that we're starting with. Remember how I said you could start with a crash, you could start with a ride, you could start with a hi-hat, you could start with whatever you want as your main kind of foundation for the groove. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play on the ride cymbal. And this is based off a basic jazz pattern. And this is a great way to just build syncopation patterns for yourself to really help you with your jazz independence or your four-way independence. So the pattern is basically this. Now let's add the snare in on all the ahs of each triplet count. So 1 and ah, 2 and ah, 3 and ah, 4 and ah. And because we're playing a much lighter feel, you don't want to hit the snare really, really loud. You don't want to play it like this. So with any groove, you want to try and be sensitive to the style you're playing, or try and be aware of what style you're actually playing, so you can kind of stay true to that within the groove. Now we're going to add the bass drum, but here's another thing, is we're also going to add the hi-hat, because the third step is adding our feet. So with any of these grooves, you can add in open hi-hat strokes. If your right hand is on the ride cymbal as kind of your foundation, feel free to play the hi-hat on quarters, ands, eighth notes, or just any other random spots in the bar. You can literally put it wherever you want. So now I'll put it all together and show you how it sounds. Now let's build it at 60 beats per minute so you can see how it all comes together. So that's an awesome groove, and I love building these jazz independence grooves this way because jazz is something I really want to focus on personally, and this is just a great way to easily do that and build a ton of challenging examples that actually work well within jazz music. So now I'm going to play it up to speed for you at 120. Exercise 9 is very, very different from anything else we've kind of done up to this point. It uses a broken pattern on the hi-hat, which up to this point we've kind of just focused on rotating patterns and patterns that are very simple and the same the whole way through, even though some of the hi-hat patterns have been complex. And so this is something you can do as well. You're not really bound to any sort of rules other than start with the hi-hat, then add the snare, then add the feet, the bass drum and the hi-hat. So here's what we're going to do. I'm just going to first play the hi-hat groove for you to show you how it sounds. Okay, so it's on one E and A, and then it's on the and of 2, then it's on the E and the and of 3, and the and of 4. So if you need to, you can just go ahead and write the count above there on the sheet music so it's easier for you to follow along. Now another thing I'll mention is I'm doing right, left on the hi-hat. And that's just personal preference. You could choose to do them all with your right hand. And when you're building these grooves, you can choose to write the sticking in right away, or you can choose to, make it whatever comes naturally to you when you actually sit down and start practicing the groove. So next step is adding in the snare drum. We're putting the snare drum on counts 2, counts 4, and then the ah of 4. And finally, let's add the bass drum in. The bass drum is fairly simple, just on count 1, count 3, and then the ah of 3. But you'll notice I put the bass drum on either side of count 3 because the hi-hat was so nicely positioned in the middle there. So it's going to give us this pretty cool, almost linear sounding groove. Here we go. So if you can build grooves like that, I swear, engineers will love you because everyone wants to hear something different than the normal. Everyone wants their music to have something that differentiates it from the millions, if not billions, of other songs out there. So it's really important for you to learn how to build these types of grooves that aren't just stock and standard. Okay, so now I'm going to play this for you, starting at 60 beats per minute, and we're going to go and build the whole groove. Now I'm going to play this up to speed for you, which it sounds best played a little bit faster. So check this out. I really do think this is such an easy way to build awesome sounding drum grooves. So I hope you're kind of catching on because we're getting to the last example. And after that, I have a big challenge for you. So make sure you stick around to the end of this lesson. Here's what number 10 is. Number 10 is basically a 16th note triplet pattern, and what I'm doing here is I'm actually splitting up the foundational pattern. So I'm using my ride and my hi-hat to start everything off. Okay? So what's happening there is this. Now the snare drum is simple. We're just bringing our right hand over from the ride to hit the snare drum in counts 2 and 4. And then finally, we're just going to put the bass drum on the 1, the and of 1, and then the 3, and the and of 3. That sounds like this. Now let's build it up with the metronome at 60 beats per minute. Now we'll try it up to speed at 120. And that is the Easy Beat system. That is how you are going to write your own beats. Now here's your assignment. I want you to choose one of these beats other than the first exercise, and I want you to practice it, starting from the first bar. Learn that part, then add the snare drum, and then add the bass drum. Okay? Be able to play that for 2 minutes straight at 60 beats per minute. Now once you've done that, just one of them, because these are my beats, these are beats that I created just randomly, and they're beats that I learned for successful drumming. So they're not a lot of stuff that I actually played before. They're sometimes built off of concepts of stuff I played before, but they are all new grooves that I just absolutely love to play. Then what I want you to do is go into the following worksheets, and you're going to see a bunch of just hi-hat patterns. And those are starting patterns for you to work off of. So take the hi-hat pattern, write it in the following bar, and then write in your snare pattern. Then write the hi-hat pattern and the snare pattern in the third bar, and then write in your bass drum pattern. And then I want you to start building your own grooves. Once you've done that with 4 or 5 grooves and you feel really confident with it, I want you to create your own grooves completely from scratch. So write your own hi-hat pattern, your own snare part, and your own bass drum part. And by that time, you're going to be laughing because it's going to be so easy for you to create these beats, and it's going to be so fun to actually be creative. You're going to love sitting down at your kit and doing this sort of thing. So I hope you guys enjoyed the Easy Beat system. Once you've done that, you've completed all the assignments, you can move on to the Drum Fill Builder.